I'm Julia, and I bake wedding cakes and dessert tables for my family and friends in my spare time.
You learned baking just on your own through like YouTube or watching people, or have you like formally been trained in like baking?
Oh no, not formally been trained. I watched YouTube videos, and also my aunt, growing up, she used to bake a lot with me, so I kind of took that with me and did made it a little bit more extreme, doing wedding cakes and but just for family and friends. I usually do it as their gift. Yeah.
Lovely. Do you have a favorite cake flavor? If I would like put you on the spot right now.
Ooh, favorite cake flavor. I like mango. I do a pretty good vanilla cupcake with mango Swiss meringue buttercream with mango on top. Um, that always tastes really good. I like fruity things.
Lovely. To sort of formally introduce you to guests, that's Julia Ip. She's an alumni of Minerva University. We've talked about Minerva quite a bit, the most innovative university in the world, which encouraged Julia to actually go to 7 different cities over the course of her 4 year education in order to earn her degree in both brand management and designing societies. Today, we'll be doing a Minerva 101. This is part two to the episode with Lillian, where we did a deep dive on academics and how those work at Minerva. I'm hoping this is slightly more lighthearted. We're going to talk a lot about everything else beyond the academics at Minerva, which is also pretty unique.
Yeah.
Talk about community, civic projects, the global rotation model, why that's so important to Minerva, and hopefully lot of different tangents over there. But welcome, Julia. Thank you for joining me today on the podcast.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. What we'll do, and this I do with all alumni who I get on the podcast, is bringing listeners up to speed. You graduated in 2022. Would love to let listeners in on what you're currently working on.
Sure. So I'm a product manager at Adobe, working on digital employee experiences. And then in my spare time too, because I don't see my career as being just one thing, but also everything I do around. I host a podcast called Humans of Minerva, for Minervans. I also volunteer at this nonprofit called Miracle Messages, and they seek to end relational poverty on the streets. So I actually worked with them for my capstone and have just continued volunteering with them for a couple of years now. It's been a few years. Yeah.
We will also be talking about the capstone in case someone is curious. That comes later on in the episode. What I want to start with is actually Humans of Minerva. And so I'll start by definitely giving credit, a decent amount of my, firstly, the very inspiration to start a personal podcast was myself joining Humans of Minerva as a host. So honestly, a lot of gratitude to you, Lillian and Leo, the founding team for that. And number two, a decent amount of the structure is also taken and inspired from Humans of Minerva, like the fast fire round of questions and the teaser. So if anyone is sort of enjoying this structure, if anyone is interested in Minerva, I highly recommend going to the Humans of Minerva podcast, checking it out. I think we're almost at 100 episodes. Am I correct? That's maybe.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, a couple more to go, and then we'll hit 100, hopefully in September.
Super. So highly recommend that. I'll put the link in the description. But would love to hear from the person who actually like conceptualized it. If you had to give a 2 or 3 sentence summary of why you started Humans of Minerva and what the podcast is about, what would that be?
Yeah, so Humans of Minerva is all about sharing the stories of people at Minerva, so including the students, the staff, the faculty, because there's such a diverse group of individuals at Minerva, and all of them have such amazing backstories. When I was in fourth year, so I started the podcast in fourth year because I realized I still didn't know a lot of my classmates. COVID kind of threw a wrench in my plans, but I didn't. I wish I got to know my classmates more during Minerva and spent more time doing one-on-ones with them. And so I was like, what's a way where I could randomly chat with people and get to know about their lives in depth. So yes, I started this podcast, and now we have a larger team, and it's still going strong.
Yeah, and you're sort of still spearheading it as an alumni. And so I'm sure it's also a great way for you to sort of be a part of the community, talk to current students like myself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a nice way to stay connected and also give back in a way as well.
what do you actually miss most about your Minerva days or about the Minerva community?
I think definitely just the conversations that I would have with Minervans. I mean, you can find people to have conversations with outside of Minerva, but I just find that Minervans in particular, because we have a common language, we talk about the HCs, we have common understanding and foundational learning. We're able to, people are just a lot more reflective about their lives and a lot more open to talking about really deep topics right off the bat with really interesting perspectives versus others that haven't gone to Minerva. It's a lot rarer to find someone who is as reflective on their journey as you'll find at Minerva, which I really, really appreciate. So I miss those conversations. I still try to host alumni events. I'm also part of the Alumni Executive Council at Minerva, so I try to host events the city I'm at to bring people together so I can have those conversations and continue those wonderful connections.
The sort of, and this is something I completely agree with you on, is the sort of the deep nature of Minervan conversations, even the first or second conversation, not just the 10th conversation, the deep and the reflective nature. Do you think that is how the students are sort of wired before they enter Minerva? Or is it sort of Minerva shapes them to have these deep and reflective conversations and be critical thinkers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, still in first year, even before we started learning very much, it was very easy to connect with people and people were very willing to talk. And I think that's the nature of Minerva's selection process is, people who come to Minerva are already very curious people. So I would say, most people are just curious before they even get to Minerva, and that's why they're there at Minerva, because they're intellectually, emotionally, spiritually curious. But then I think the Minerva pedagogy, I think, help fosters that creativity and that curiosity even more. And so you start to have really interesting conversations, especially when you learn about different concepts in class. That you're kind of lightly debating over, then you get to know your classmates even more.
In terms of, I want to spend 2 minutes with you on curiosity. I think it's something that's been touched on the podcast so much, but I've never actually done a super deep dive. Hopefully this answer is also applicable to someone who doesn't end up coming to Minerva. This is for college in general. But as per you, again, not a Minerva specific question, what role do you think that curiosity plays in the whole college journey? Why is it important in having a more enriching college experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any kind of education, it's really the work that you put in is the reward that you'll get out, right? And by being curious, it's helping you to actually be interested in what you're learning, first of all, right? Which is really important, because if you're not interested in what you're learning, if you're not someone who will ask questions and dive deeper and ask why, then you're not really going to understand as well or want to learn as much, right? So, I mean, I think that the best thing for learning, what I hope in the far future when I have kids, I want to really foster that that curiosity in terms of asking questions and always thinking about why, and keep drilling down. So I think that's how you are able to better understand core concepts, is when you keep asking why and not just accepting what comes at you.
Yeah, I feel curiosity and sort of critical thinking, I would sort of put them as complementary skills, and so curious people will also maybe find loopholes and sort of go a step further. And important for them to be curious. Minerva focuses on the 4 C's. That's what a lot of our first year curriculum and the HCs are built upon. By the way, if HCs is a new term, we defined that in Lillian's episode in depth. 4 C's of creativity, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, very important to develop. And I think Minerva has built, especially the first year curriculum, maybe all the 4 years around sort of these 4 C's. More broadly, I think in college, it's good to sort of invest in activities and people who will help you develop these 4 C's. These are sort of a magic pill for sort of better success or better and more enriching college journey and beyond. Um, One last question
For
here
sure.
before we sort of actually get into our before university section and talk about how you landed up at Minerva, which always is an
Yeah.
interesting story.
Mhm.
One question which might be of interest again to many listeners interested in sort of product management and that being the end goal. I see this a lot among peers that this is now like the next big thing. I want to be a product manager.
Mhm.
Most of my classmates who want to go in that direction are definitely pursuing computer science. Like they want to be very technical people, and maybe they're
Mm.
complicated with business, maybe not. You didn't do computer science at Minerva. You did business and social sciences. Do you feel like one is able to get to a product management role and succeed there even without those technical skills?
Yeah, I definitely think so, but it is rare nowadays. Nowadays, a lot of like larger tech companies, especially, are looking for technical product managers. So, um, I am of a rare, rare breed.
Hmm.
Um, it is a lot harder to find non-technical product roles, but what you want to look for are roles that are more like user research and business focus and less like computer science technical heavy. You still have to understand technical concepts, but you don't need to code or anything, right? So you only need to understand at a high level. But if you're able to find those specific roles, so usually if it's not like product management specifically, it might be called like strategy consultant or innovation strategist or product strategist. Those are also like the strategy roles tend to be more like research plus business focused, which is what I came from. But my role happens to be called product manager.
Hmm. Okay. I think we'll rewind way back in time. So we actually were in sort of your days after graduation. What we'll do is go quite back in time. This is probably down
Yeah.
memory lane for you, but we'll get into sort of high school days. And so high school Julia, maybe grade 10, grade
Mm.
12. Want to talk about how you actually found out about Minerva? And then what was the whole
Yeah.
process of actually deciding that this is the university you want to attend? I have a lot of respect, especially for like you, Lillian, M22. Minerva was maybe 3 or 4 years old by the time you guys actually joined. There was no alumni. So very, very
Yeah.
the unconventional decision. Walk us through like the whole decision making process.
Yeah, sure. So I never intended to leave Canada. So I grew up in Toronto. I never intended to leave Canada for university because Canadian education is pretty good and it's way cheaper than going to the US or elsewhere. Um, but I was at some Christmas party and I happened to meet an alumni, or not an alumni, now he's an alumni, but I happened to meet just an upperclassman who had finished his first year, came back, and we were in the same business club in high school together. And so he came for this Christmas party, and I started talking to him. And he was talking to me about this like crazy university he was at, where he was like traveling and seemed really cool. And so I looked it up. I was like, okay, this is legit. Let me apply, especially because it doesn't require SAT or ACT.
Hmm.
And so I was really intrigued by the application process too. So originally, before I went into tech, I actually wanted to be an urban planner. So that's like someone who designs cities, designs policies for cities. So I was applying to urban planning undergraduate programs in Canada. There's only two really, at Waterloo and at Ryerson, or it's called TMU now. And when I applied to those ones, I literally just like pressed a button in the system and it sent my grades and that's it. There's like nothing else I did. Urban planning is not a very competitive program in Canada. And there's only two undergraduate programs that offered it. So, it was a very, really easy application process. And I just remember being like, wait, that's it? Like, I did so much in high school. Did so many extracurriculars, was a top student, like, did all this stuff. And, like, sure, yes, it was, like, to help develop my work ethic and, like, for the good of it. But, like, I was kind of disappointed that my application process, all these universities want to know was just, oh, what was your average at the end of the year? And that's literally it. That was like a huge contrast to Minerva's application process, which is one of the reasons I actually decided to go, because I was like, okay, the people who go through this application process, like these are the classmates I want. These are the people I want to talk to and learn with for the next 4 years. So that actually, like, the more difficult application process, but what I felt was more comprehensive of who I was, is what also drew me to to go to Minerva. Yeah, I filled out the application. It was, yeah, they say you can't prepare for it. You really can't. It's like, yeah, you just got to go with whatever you know at that moment. And yeah, and now I'm here. It was, my parents were surprisingly pretty supportive. My mom was quite skeptical at first. She was like, there's no graduating class yet. Like, how about if they go bankrupt halfway through and, like, you have to leave? I'm like, those are very real concerns, very valid concerns. But I was like, I'll do 1 year here. If I don't like it, then I can always switch and go back to Waterloo or something easily. If I went to a different university and want to transfer to Minerva, that'd be a lot harder. So I was like, let me just go on this adventure for a year. Let's see what happens. And if I like it, then I'll stick with it. If I don't like it, I'll just transfer somewhere else, right? It's not the end of the world. So my parents agreed, and my dad was surprisingly really supportive as well. The rest of my family was like supportive, but also like kind of concerned. And also my teachers too were, I think, quite shocked, just because they didn't really know what the school was, right? And they kind of thought it was just like an online school, and they're like, "Why? What is Julia doing? Are you sure you want to do that? Like, why are you going to this weird university?"
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't really understand what it was, but yeah, so that was a little hard to live through, and like my friends were also like, "What is this? Where is she going? Like, what?" So it was definitely a leap, but I'm glad I made that leap.
Ooh. Let's talk about the leap. Again, as I said, there was not even a graduating class. At least for me, I can tell my parents that yes, some alumni have gone on to like pursue PhDs at Stanford. Some of them are working in big tech. Some of them are consulting. Decently smart people. Have a look them up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's about 10 years old at this point. In your case, a year is still like 4 years is a very long time. A year is still a decently long time. Why did you want to sort of take this huge risk and take the leap of like potentially wasting this 1 year and then just getting back to a Canadian school? Why was that like important to you?
Yeah, I think I was really intrigued by the pedagogy that they were advertising. And also the prospect of traveling was very attractive to me. I had never lived anywhere outside of Toronto my life. So I wanted to try something different. Also, I was like, it's 1 year. Like, it's not, in the grand scheme of things, like, of life, it's not that significant.
Mm.
So like, what's the worst that could happen, right? Like, I waste this year, but I still, have a good time traveling, hopefully, and then I go back and then, do finish university elsewhere, and that's fine. On the other hand, I was like, if I go to Waterloo or TMU, I am like locked into my program. It's a very narrow program. It's like I'm going into urban planning, and that's what you're getting at the end of it. And I could like see my life laid out in front of me. I wasn't sure if that was really what I wanted. Versus at Minerva, I think I was able to, like, I thought it would give me more of an ability to explore my interests a little bit more before committing to one thing, and it did. So I'm glad I made that leap. And
Mm.
also, like, Minerva actually sent two staff members to come to Markham, where I'm from, like Toronto, to talk to my parents. And so there's like, they're real people from this university. It's real. And I think they also convinced my parents that, okay, this is legit. We want your daughter. Like, we'll take care of her. So yeah.
I think when I'm talking to M28s, especially the Indians, is what I'll speak for, and especially their parents. I tell everybody start with one semester. Pay the upfront cost for one semester if you're able to afford that decently. Send your child to San Francisco for one semester. The best case scenario, they will love it and they will continue with Minerva. On the worst case scenario is that they will get 4 months in an incredible city of San Francisco, meet interesting people, meet into very interesting Minervans who they at least have an initial connection to, even if they switch to another university, and now they sort of be independent and sort of have that adulting phase as well. So even in my case, I started with the first semester, I enjoyed it. I said second semester. After second semester, I was like, okay, I'm doing this for 4 years. So if nothing else, think of it as like half of a gap year, which I think is
Yeah.
there's definitely that testing phase, and we will come to this later. There are definitely students whom I think should decently steer clear from Minerva, based on certain ambitions they have for the future, based on certain personality traits. And we like to be very open about that, even as current Minervans, because you know it's not for everyone. Some people thrive there, and some people want to get out after the first week, and that's okay. So,
For sure.
what I want to, we've talked about getting into Minerva and getting accepted. You began with urban planning, and then there was sort of a drastic shift to business and social sciences, and now you're like working in tech as a product manager. How did sort of your experience through Minerva change your like career interests?
Yeah, so when I started at Minerva, I still wanted to be an urban planner. After first year, I still wanted to be an urban planner. So after my first year, I interned at the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. So I was working there in their finance department, learning about transit. But when COVID hit in the second year, that's really when things started to change. So I was doing all these civic projects that like lined up my path for urban planning still, because I was just really fascinated by cities and the community and how spaces can bring people together. But in second year, COVID hit, physical environment took a pause. I was like, okay, how can I apply the skills I liked using, which was mainly doing user research, because we would do research with community members to understand what they wanted in their community, and I really loved that. So I was like, how can I do that but in a digital way, since the physical environment seems to be taking a pause. And so that's how I started getting into tech, also because everyone at Minerva seems to like, Minerva is really big in tech. So then during that summer, during COVID, when COVID hit, my internship that I had got rescinded because of COVID. So I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I started just doing a bunch of side things. I was working part-time for this like product management, online product management education platform. So that's how I got introduced to product management. I kind of wanted to go into user research, and then that turned into like product design, and then that turned into service design, and then eventually that turned into product management. And I was never someone who was like, oh, I want to do product management from the start. I wasn't like, even graduating Minerva, I wasn't like, I'm going to be a product manager. Like, I want to recruit for product management. I actually was more interested in the research part. So when I applied to Adobe for my internship in third year, they actually didn't have a service design internship. So the closest thing I could find was like business analyst. So I applied to that, and then like 2 weeks before I started, my manager was like, hey, do you want to change your title to like product manager intern? I was like, okay, sure, like, because I knew that was a hot title in the industry. And he was like, yeah, I'll just give you more opportunities. So like, even if we don't have a spot in our team, like, it'll give you more, like a larger range of possibilities for you to apply to other teams as well. And so I was like, okay, sure, why not? So I got the title change, and then after that, I just rejoined the team after I graduated, and I've been there ever since. So yeah, I'm still a product manager. But now that I'm actually doing the work, I do think this is what I like doing, because the one thing I didn't like about research is like you can give recommendations, but in the end, you don't have control over what gets shipped or not, right? Versus product manager, you do the research or you work with researchers, and then you're able to make that decision. You're able to draw out, this is what we should be developing and then execute. So yeah, I like that. I like that part of product management. Like you can really see the impact that you're making.
Okay. And I think this is something I've seen, especially upperclassmen have told me, is that the first year of Minerva, which we won't do a deep dive on here, we did a deep dive with Lillian. The first year of Minerva, where we talk about the HCs and do courses in all these different departments. A lot of it is an absolute like 180-degree turn. Someone who wanted to do like the arts gets into it, gets into computer science, vice versa. So a lot of students end up actually changing their majors because of that first year exposure and curriculum, which I love about Minerva. I think it's a great place for people who are not sure what they like, have maybe 5, 6 different interests in life. I think Minerva gives decent clarity, at least over the course of the 4 years, through projects and civic projects. Again, you hinted at, we'll come to later as well. But yeah, let's say a little bit more about your very interesting concentration called designing societies. Just the name is very intriguing to me. Brand management is sort of Minerva's marketing focus within the business department. So that is pretty straightforward, just for the listeners. Designing societies is a very interesting and a special concentration which Minerva offers. Part one, just talk through at a high level what the concentration covered, and part two is your motivation for actually doing the designing societies concentration.
Yeah, so design societies is like a weird mishmash of politics, economics, and psychology on one. We're really thinking at a very high level, well, at different levels of analysis, but you're thinking about how do we, like the name says, design our societies. What are the rules that we should have? What are the governance models that we should have? Economically, what should we be considering? And psychology wise, like how do we we need to understand how we think and how we are motivated and persuaded in order to design good societies. So I did it because, well, kind of like in first year, as you were saying, like I came into Minerva being a very math and science girl. I was like, that's what I did growing up. That was what I did in high school. That's what I thrived in. Then I come to Minerva, and we have like these different. You have to take the 4 different, like one course from each college, and I had taken a course from the social science college called Complex Systems, and I absolutely fell in love with it because I'm just super interested in like relationships between people, not just like romantic relationships, but just like friendships in general, and how communities come together and why. So coming with the lens of I wanted to do urban planning, I thought that was very fitting for it. And then design societies was like directly related to urban planning too. So like I think on the website it actually said like potential careers after this was like urban planning is one of them. So I chose it initially because I wanted to go into urban planning, but also just because those were the classes that I was really interested in. And I recommend this to anyone when you're choosing what concentrations to do, or what courses to do. Like just read the course descriptions, pick the course descriptions that sound interesting to you, and then see if that makes up a concentration, or see if that makes up a major. And oftentimes it does, and if it doesn't, you can always request a special concentration too and create your own, right? So that was my approach. I literally just like looked at what are the courses I want to take based on the course description, and then saw what that equaled to, and it was designing societies. So yeah,
very reassuring for me to hear. That is like almost literally what I did. And so in social sciences, I'm doing a mix of economics and psychology, and that's going to be a special concentration because it's not that Minerva offers. But I think that's a great way to like approach concentrations. What I've done is we've actually fast forwarded into Minerva days. I will again pull us back to high school days, because I think it's very valuable to talk about the Minerva application. And something I've learned is that oftentimes the application of a university will, and I'm not saying this in a good or a bad way, but the application of the university will tell you a decent amount about the university itself and about the type of students you
Mm-hmm.
might actually find there. And so I think Minerva's application speaks a lot about what they value in the students and what kind of students you might find at Minerva. Let's walk through. I think there are three main steps of the application worth covering. Let's walk through the different components. Again, I'm testing your memory here.
Yes, I mean, I the application process might have changed since I graduated because it's been a while. But when I was applying, we there's like three different components. One section was your academics, the recommendation letters. So it's not just how well you do in classes, but how hard are those classes as well. So they do look at like if you're in an IB program or if you're in AP classes versus like a standard academic class, right? So that matters, recommendation letters. The second part is then your accomplishments. So you have to list 6 accomplishments. And what accomplishment means is really up to you. So it could be like, I don't know, you get your black belt in the karate, which I did. Or it could be you were president of some club at your school. Or it could be like, I don't know, you are an artist and got your art featured in an art gallery. Or it could even be like you graduated high school and helped your, like, while also taking care of your sick grandpa or something. I don't know. Like, it could be like an accomplishment, could be anything, whatever you deem is an accomplishment, which I thought was very interesting. So I'm like, oh, I'm curious as to what other people put as well. So there's 6 of them with like a short description. And then the next part is like the tests. So Minerva doesn't do SAT, ACT. They do their own version of standardized testing. So there's like creativity. There was a problem solving. There was math, which I'm pretty sure I like bombed. I only did like half the questions and somehow still got it. And then there's also the written essay and then a timed interview after. But the written essay isn't like, it's like a timed essay, but it wasn't like, what are your strengths and weaknesses kind of thing. It was actually a situation they give you, and then you have to respond to the situation of like what you would do. So I thought that was super intriguing too, because I was like, oh yeah, I don't have to write this like long thing about myself. It's really about how I think, which was like, oh, this is interesting. And then it went straight into like interview, timed interview. Yeah.
I'll add on a bit to accomplishments. I think why accomplishments are different from extracurriculars is extracurriculars are maybe, as you said, sports, art, certificates, competitions, months. Accomplishments can be a bit broader. And so, as you said, I took care of my sick grandpa through 4 years of high school. I have a friend who wrote about I helped my family overcome like the passing away of my father. I have like a friend who wrote about I worked a part-time job to support my family financially during tough times. I have a friend who wrote about my brother has seizures in the middle of the night and I'm his like first responder. And so just very, very interesting things. And I can attest to the fact that a lot of us first, second conversation, not as like a judgment, but just out of curiosity, we ask each other like, oh, what were some interesting accomplishments you actually put on the application that tells you a lot about the person and their journey before Minerva.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear about what people put, because you get very different things from different cultures as well.
Yeah. What we'll do now is we'll fast forward in time and we'll talk about the Minerva experience itself. The reason I love having alumni on is you've gone through the 4 years and the 7 cities, and now you can look back in retrospect and say that this is how this part of the model helped, and this is what I enjoyed, this is what I didn't, this is what I took away from this. And so we're talking a lot about, as I said, the non-academic parts of Minerva. What we should start with absolutely is the global rotation. That's probably maybe like 9 out of 10 students, that's the number one reason they come. And that's the top city of Minerva is on their website. You clearly find the world map and the 7 cities with like an orange dot. So let's talk through why was it, how do you think your experience at Minerva was more enriching versus if you had spent 4 years in like one place? What was the big difference there actually?
Yeah, so Minerva always likes to say, you can't change the world if you haven't seen it. I think that's really true. I think what one of the key things I took away from Minerva was really through its diverse students, but then also the diverse places that you're living through. So visiting a place is also very different from living in a place and having to like find community there and talk to locals and immerse yourself in the city fully. So whenever I tell people like, oh yes, our classes are online, they're like, oh, why is it online if you're traveling everywhere? Like, and I'm like, that's the whole point is that it enables us to be able to travel everywhere, right? While still taking courses and classes from a top tier higher education institution at Minerva. So, I mean, I think the power in being able to travel is you're exposed to all these different cultures. And back to the thing of curiosity is like, it helps foster that curiosity too, because you're like, oh, this culture does something really differently from how I grew up doing things, and then it starts to make you think, and you're like, oh, like maybe my way is not the best, or maybe this way is not the best, or like how you start to it helps you start to question some of the things that you have just taken for granted, or you have just settled, and just things that have become habit. It makes you question all that and really think for yourself, like, okay, what do I think about this? What's my perspective on this? It's not which one's the best way necessarily, but it helps you become really reflective on yourself and your own journey. And I think that's really what I wanted to take away from Minerva is like, who am I a little bit more, and what do I like doing, and how and what ways can I contribute, right? Oftentimes I think other universities, if you're staying in one place for so long, it's like you just get wrapped up in your little bubble, right, of a university and a bubble of students. And it doesn't make you like question things as much, right? And sure, there definitely probably are students that naturally do that and naturally are very reflective, but I think Minerva is just puts you in an environment where it forces you to confront these really core questions of like, who are you, what do you believe, why, which I think is very powerful. So I think that like I would rather I take away like better knowing myself and having thought of those questions from my university rather than like, I don't know, how to do math or how to do science or what different theories are, like I think university is really about it's your step into adulthood. You're trying to figure out who you are, what you like doing. And I feel like if I was put in a regular university learning just like with lectures and exams, I definitely am not the kind of person who would just like naturally think about be super reflective of those things, right? Like I just wouldn't even know that I could question certain things in my life. And I could totally see myself just like, again, wanting to be top of my class and just getting good grades, and that's basically my life. And then I come out of university and I'm like, wait a second, what am I doing? Who am I? And I have a crisis. Like that's how my path would have ended up if I didn't go to Minerva and had that opportunity to explore through traveling and through being exposed to different perspectives, different cultures.
There's this famous quote, no? The world is a book, and those who don't travel are reading only a page. I keep coming back to that through like my Minerva journey. I feel like I still haven't had the full experience because I've still only been to one city. I feel like it actually starts from the next year when I'm going to Taipei and Seoul, which I'm very excited. Want to actually talk about these 7 cities. And I know you're not the one who chose these 7 cities, but each student has their own like perspective as to why these 7. I'll begin by listing them. We've got San Francisco, Taipei, Seoul, Buenos Aires, Hyderabad, Berlin, London, which you guys were lucky to have. Unfortunately, we don't. But they're adding Tokyo to the list. So those are our cities. From a student perspective, I'm sure this question came up multiple times. What do you think just maybe a few of the reasons why these 7 cities specifically were chosen by Minerva? Like, what are a few of their priorities for choosing a city?
Yeah, so I mean, we actually asked the founder this multiple times, and I don't know exactly what he said, but there's definitely there's definitely a long list of requirements. Has to have stable Wi-Fi being one because we are an online university. Has to be relatively safe. Has to have good infrastructure for a bunch of rowdy students to be able to come. Housing, a good place for housing, good, like just basic human needs can be met. But also, like, they wanted to choose large, like, really metropolitan cities that are really different from each other in terms of like industries that are present, but also like very different cultures as well, highlighting very different cultures, just to expose you to different ways of doing things, right? So I know like Seoul and Hyderabad, for example, I think that when they first introduced, so for us in second year, it was Seoul and then Hyderabad. And the way they framed it was that they're both cities that have that in the past like decade, or I guess 2 decades now, have really seen massive growth. And they've grown into very different cities in different ways. So they were urging us to kind of think about the differences between these two cultures, the differences we see in these different cities, who have both undergone a lot of change in recent years. San Francisco, I think, was chosen just because, like, that is the tech hub and innovation hub of the U.S., in Silicon Valley Bay area. So I think that was just one for student exposure to, like, a really innovative industry and innovative location too. So just pure access to the tech world and the resources that are there in those cities, I think is very valuable. I think some of the connections I've made living in the city and being in the Bay Area definitely helped me in my career, and I think has helped a lot of others as well. And then the other ones, Berlin, London, which we got. I don't know why they were in the rotation. I mean, I think they're really, again, they're large hubs, right? I think in all cities they try to find cities that are more like innovative in their own ways, just because that helps. The city is usually more welcome to Minerva students too. So it's interesting to hear when the rotation changes or evolves. Sadly, my class did not get to go to Buenos Aires or Taipei because of COVID. So we only got Berlin, London, Seoul, Hyderabad, and SF. But I've had a lot of fun in those cities.
I think you've covered most of the bases. I will emphasize cultural hubs and tech hubs. Tech hubs applies to most cities. Cultural hubs applies to all cities. Very important. As I was talking to me about this a few days ago, which I thought very interesting, is a few of the cities might seem like natural. That as to like, yes, if I were designing Minerva, I would include SF, Berlin, London. A few of them are not as natural, and so Buenos Aires, Hyderabad, maybe Seoul. Minerva could have very well gone with like Sydney, Singapore, Dubai. I keep questioning. I think I haven't confirmed this. My hypothesis is that they want us to also go a bit out of the way and explore cities which we might otherwise never even have visited over the course of like a lifetime. I know in my case that would be like Seoul, Taipei, Buenos Aires. I might not even have gone there for like vacation. They want to show you a different side of the world. And what's interesting is that most Minerva students, somewhere in a city, they'll have culture shocks and they will have a learning experience. Maybe for the Westerners, that is like Hyderabad, Seoul. Maybe for someone like myself, that is actually like Buenos Aires or Berlin, if not Seoul and Taipei as much. So that is very interesting. Like each Minervan will have one city that is like particularly challenging for sure, if not multiple.
Yeah.
But that's also where a lot of learning comes in.
For sure.
And this is probably the much awaited question, since you've got online classes, Julia, why are you actually in the cities? What do you do in the cities?
Yeah, so in the cities, there are curated student experiences. There are also civic projects. So I think civic projects have kind of evolved since I was at Minerva. But for me, when I was at Minerva in first year, it was like a mandatory to do civic projects. Every semester after that, it was optional. But it was very integrated within our curriculum as well. So if you did choose to do a civic project, that could count as credit. And what that was Minerva has a list of partners that they partner with. They're just companies and organizations within the city. And then based on your interest and the company's interest, they'll match you up and you do like a practical project with them for that semester. So I did one all of first year in San Francisco with the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. And then like later interned with them in the summer. In Seoul, I did one with Urban Society as like this architecture firm, again, because I was interested in urban planning, and actually designed the rooftop of the residential hall in Seoul. And I think now it's actually like functioning, which is cool. So before there was like nothing on that rooftop. So it's cool to see how it actually happened. That was like a full semester. I'm not sure how civic projects work now, but back then too, it was like a full semester working on one question with one civic partner. In Hyderabad, I worked with a volunteer nonprofit called Chizuba that helped link. It was like an online platform that linked nonprofits that needed help with skilled workers. And then so like I would volunteer to do like design, for example, for a nonprofit. So you can like find different volunteering opportunities on this platform, which is pretty cool. So I don't know. I think working with a local company and organization also teaches you how to do business around the world, what business looks like, because there are very different cultures. And it also, our residential halls are just like apartment buildings, right? So there's no like gym, there's no library, there's no cafeteria. You have to find those resources yourself in those cities. And we also don't have sports teams either. So you really need to like immerse yourself within the local sports teams, local library, really get to know the area and the people in the city. So that's definitely a highlight. And yeah, like why travel? Why have a global rotation is to help you open up your perspective to the world and realize what's out there and realize that there's different cultures that are different from your own. Yeah.
You spoke about civic projects very well at a macro level. I want to bring it one level micro for listeners who are still sort of questioning why civic projects, what's the value here? Can you share any one specific example of when you realized, oh, this country or this city has an interesting working style, an interesting working culture, which like I as a Canadian have never been exposed to before? Any such example that come to mind?
Yeah, definitely Seoul was very different. It was my first time. That was also the first city that I lived in outside of North America, and so that was like a huge culture shock to me. In terms of like how they do business differently. So one, relationships are really important. So they're very relationship-based culture. So it's very normal to go out and to eat with your colleagues and drink with your colleagues. It's important to foster that like close relationship with them as like personally as humans, not just, oh, I show up to work today, do my thing, I clock out, and then that's it, right? Which is kind of more North American culture. Even the small things like during meetings, they'll sometimes have drinks in the middle, and like they'll make a soda can or like a bottle of water or something, and then there's like cups around it. And in Korea, you're supposed to like even if it's just like a soda can, you're not supposed to take the whole thing. You're supposed to pour it into a cup and then drink from the cup. And also, like, even more is, like, you pour for other people, and then, other people pour for you. In North America, it's like, no, I would just take the soda can and drink it. So it's just, like, etiquette, little things like that. When you're shaking someone's hand, you also, like, you put your hand on your other hand as a sign of respect. So little things like that you pick up and you get exposed to. So yeah, it kind of prepares you to be able to do business with different cultures around the world, and especially since our world is becoming more globalized. In my job today too, like I work with team members all over the world, and so this has been really really useful to just have context that different cultures do things differently.
Mm. And even if this is a big assumption I'm making, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming even if, let's say, tomorrow at your workplace you have a Brazilian and you've never been to Brazil, why Minerva helps is the very basic fact that you know that this person has a different working style or a different cultural approach, and you might actually take the time to get to know them on a more cultural and personal level, enabling you to like work better. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely applicable even for places that you haven't been. I think Minerva also does a good job of helping you adapt really, really quickly to a very different environment. Not just business wise, but also living wise as well. Like, I think in first year, it took me like a couple months, like a whole semester to get settled into SF and be like I was settled. By the time I was in fourth year, it took me like a week. Like I knew these are the things I need: grocery store, phone number, like just bam, and I just would go down and like, okay, I'm good. After a week, I'm good. I'm settled. I can start doing stuff now. So it helps you adapt really, really quickly.
And I've heard this so much from alumni that they actually find it difficult to settle in one place more than like a year. And they're like itching to sort of leave because of the 4 year novelty experience.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I would say that's true for the first couple years. After Minerva, you'll be like, I'm in this place for a long time. I feel like I need to move because your body's so used to it. After a couple years, though, I don't know. I am definitely like I am tired of moving. I would like to stay in one place. So for the past couple of years, I've also had to make a lot of moves as well, just because of visa reasons. And I'm moving to SF on Friday, and hopefully we'll be there for like 3 years at least. So I'm ready to dive a little deeper. So I think this is the other interesting thing about Minerva too. I feel like Minerva really teaches you to chase novelty. So like new experiences, new location, new environment, new people. At sometimes, if you're not careful about really being intentional about it, at the expense of nuance. So like diving deep into something, and instead of just going for completely new things, you learn new things by going more nuance into one thing, right? And that's how you actually become an expert in something. But for me, the analogy is like living in different cities. It's like great, I get to travel different places. 4 months is not enough time to really like really get to learn about a culture, really dive deep, but you get a sense of what it's like in a broader sense. I think coming out of Minerva, I was still looking for that novelty in my life. But now I think after a couple of years, I'm like, okay, no, now I just want to focus on nuance. Like, okay, I've been to San Francisco before, but what else about San Francisco have I not explored yet? Even the friendships I have, how can I take them to the next level deeper, right? So I think now in this next phase of my life, I'm going more for nuance rather than novelty, which is I think what Minerva does really well.
hmm. That's an interesting like distinction to make. I definitely also agree. I think Minerva, and maybe this is something that happens in the years to come. So for my juniors, Minerva is experimenting with year-long rotations because too many students have sort of complained that yes, 7 cities sounds fancy, but also becomes emotionally draining to keep moving every 4 months. And 4 months,
Oh, for sure.
you'll feel this as a Minerva that 4 months is not enough. There's a lot of regrets when you leave a place behind and you don't know when you're coming back. So Minerva is actually experimenting with year-long rotations. Like we've got a year in SF and a year in Berlin as per now. So I I want to talk about culture shocks for a moment. I feel like
Mm.
we've been talking about some more micro sort of this is how we do business in a place, this is etiquette, taking it out of the business setting, maybe talking more about values, beliefs, or like worldviews. I think culture shocks are very important. Some of them can 180 degrees transform how you view something or how you actually live your life. If something happens at that level, a few of those might actually be happening to me over
Yeah.
my journey. Not yet, but I'm looking forward to them happening over the next 3 years. Have you had any of those huge culture shocks over the 4 years that actually was a 180-degree shift in your worldview or the way you're actually living your life?
Mm. I think second year, like Seoul and Hyderabad were both like culture shocks. Um, Hyderabad I actually would say was more of a culture shock just because I think I have a nut allergy, um, which is very difficult in India because like all curries contain nuts, like cashew powder and stuff. So it was really difficult for me. In the first 2 weeks, I like had an allergic reaction like every other day. It was not fun, but it was necessary because like I want to try everything. Because when you ask, like they just don't. Um, even if they'll be like, oh no, there's no like physical nuts in it, but sometimes they'll forget that there's like powder, or like there's cross contamination and stuff. So yeah, nut allergies are not a thing in Asia. So yeah, I don't really know about it or care about it very much. So I literally had a list of like 10 things I could eat by the end of those 2 weeks and just like stuck to those 10 things for like 3 months until we got kicked out because of COVID. So that was hard, definitely hard. I discovered that I was very much a food person. I really do my food. Other than food though, I'd also say just like going out on the streets, like just walking around was so different than what I was used to. And Seoul as well, but like more Hyderabad. Like I remember there being like 10 lanes of traffic. There's no pedestrian stop sign. You're just like holding out your hand and just walking and hoping that you don't die. You're like holding your like friend's hands and like I hope I don't die. You just walk. So that was really interesting to see. The autos like so fun. But also kind of like I felt like I was on a roller coaster like every single day. Or like, I was like, am I gonna die today? Am I not? So yeah, that was very interesting. Yeah, just like different, even just like when I was at the office, at the Shizuba office, they have like chai breaks like every now and then, where this, someone will bring the whole office chai and go around asking who wants chai. I was like, oh, this is so nice. So things like that. Also, so like just physical environment too is very different. The way you live life is very different. So even doing laundry, it's like, you have to, I would wash it and then to dry, there's no dryer, like you just hang dry things. Our kitchen was interesting. I think our res hall was like nice, but was interesting. I was not used to like we had like a massive. I just remember the first day we walk into our apartment and I'm going into the kitchen and like I like cooking and I like food, right? And our kitchen was like a propane tank in the middle of the room was like a massive propane tank hooked up to this like tiny little grill thing. And I've never seen like just like a massive propane tank in the middle of the kitchen. So that was interesting. Yeah, it was very different. It was fun. When I wasn't dying of like an allergic reaction. I know a lot of my classmates really enjoyed Hyderabad too. Like I think the food when you can eat it is like so good. Really know how to use spices. And the architecture there is really pretty too. Like the castles and the palaces are really pretty. But definitely just a very different way of living.
Hmm. Hyderabad is one of those love-hate cities. Either you love it or you hate it. Either you want to stay or you want to very much leave. But it's so interesting, especially for Minervans who come not only from that city but from the country. So let's say a German or an Indian or a Taiwanese or a
Mm-hmm.
Korean. It's so interesting to actually something which let's say me as a Hyderabadi I've taken for granted for years. I've lived here all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many things, and I'm like, wow, this is actually not something which everyone takes for granted. This is very new to some people. My friend is from San Francisco. She's a local.
Yeah.
And so seeing me just go, wow, you've got great public transport, you've got great parks. Oh my God, the Golden Gate Bridge. Oh my God, the fog. She was like, I've lived here my whole life. This is not new for me. I'm looking forward to a similar experience happening with me and my classmates in Hyderabad. And so this also happens not only in the city, but when you're interacting with classmates as to like, I took this for granted my whole life. I like, let's say I took electricity 24/7 for granted my whole life. Someone's coming from a town or a South African like village, and they are like, no, we have power cuts half the day. And you're like, wow, that's
Yeah.
a lot of gratitude, definitely,
Oh, for sure.
for things you took for granted. Um,
Oh, for sure. Like everything. Everything. I feel like okay, growing up in Canada, it's like you have a pretty good life, right? Like, yes, you have running water all the time, you have electricity 24/7. Um, there's like, I complain about public transit here, but like, it's way better than like a lot of other places in the world that don't
yeah.
have public transit or have functioning public transit. So as much as I, will like laugh with my friends or like complain to my friends about certain things here, I'm like, it, like, having traveled to different places around the world definitely has opened my eyes to like, no, there's so many things here that I definitely take for granted.
Mm.
Even just like washrooms and like availability of washrooms and like tap water, being able to drink tap water, um, and go to a restaurant and just ask for tap water and they give it to you for free. Like that is also very different. I will say though, like when I was in Berlin, for example, like the thing I loved about there was their bike system too, and their bikes. Like even in Amsterdam, it's not part of the rotation, but I was in Amsterdam for a bit. People just leave their bikes like unlocked,
Mm.
just on the streets, and I'm like, oh my god! In North America, it would get stolen so quickly. I think I had my bike stolen in San Jose when I was there, like from my apartment building, like bike complex. Like I was locked in the bike area of my apartment building, and someone stole it, and I was like, what? How? Meanwhile, people in like Berlin and in Amsterdam are just leaving their bikes out, and it's just like that. There's a different level of public trust and safety there, which is very interesting.
Let's talk about not having a physical campus. I know that a lot of parents have complained to me like online classes are okay, everything is okay. They should have some sort of a campus, right? Where students can actually spend their time, walk around in safety, library, gym, cafeteria. Why should my child have to take care of all three meals themselves? There's definitely pros and cons. There's a long list of cons. There's also a long list of pros. I have my own list. Let's start with your list of like pros and cons not having a campus.
Yeah, I would say pros, it forces you to grow up very quickly. Um, which actually I feel like that may be a con, a pro and con depending on how you look at it. The fact is, like, when you're moving to a city and you have to do all these things by yourself, you become an adult very, very quickly. You become very independent. You know how to feed yourself. You know how to get a phone plan yourself, how to go to the gym, find a local library, things that you'd need to do eventually once you leave university. But it's quite a jump from high school for at least me. Like I, grew up at home. It was a huge jump having to do all this stuff myself. But yeah, it made me grow up really quickly. And so now after Minerva, it's like super easy for me to just carry on living because I've already been doing it for 4 years. Um, Pro, I would say getting to know the community more too. Because you're forced to go outside, you're forced to meet locals at local gyms, local libraries, and really learn about that culture a little bit more so than you would, and explore a lot more than like being on a physical campus. Like, I one of the cons I'd say is like, yeah, you don't get the party life that you typically get at a normal college. But personally, and this isn't for everyone, personally, I'd rather have someone ask me like, hey, do you want to go climb this mountain today? Versus, hey, let's go party tonight, right? Like, I'd rather climb the mountain. So I really, it's like that has just worked for me. Con, like, it is a lot. is overwhelming at times. To have to learn to be an adult while also trying to do well in school and learn in school. It's just a lot of learning, a lot of overload. So you really have to be like organized about things. You really need to be like self-disciplined in order to survive at Minerva, I feel like. I would say pro two about being in a city versus on on like a regular campus is our classes are quite small. Like they're 150. I think now maybe around 200, or sometimes less. Around 150 to 200 people. Traveling in together with those people with a small class, you get very close to them. You get to know everyone's names. You get to find your people. It's like actually, so 150 is Dunbar's number, which is like the perfect number of, like on average, number of relationships that a human can hold at once.
Okay.
And you're able to like on one side, you're able to like find people that you do want to connect with. You can also avoid people you don't want to connect with. It's just a good number to have. And so, like, that makes you really close with people. Con would be, yes, we don't have sports teams. We don't really have extracurriculars, which I know a lot of people look forward to in university. You have to do that yourself. I mean, our class is so small, like, hiking club would just be you and your friends, like, going hiking. Like, it's not really a club. I would also say, like, moving every 4 months means that you don't have upperclassmen in the city that you're in, which also kind of sucks. So you don't get to make that cross-class connections. I know they're trying to improve that in other ways now at Minerva, but that really sucks. So it's like every single time you have to figure things out by yourself. There's no upperclassmen helping you do things, or like at other universities. So yeah, that I wish we had more of, but that just comes with moving every 4 months. Yeah, I don't know. That's my list so far.
That is a very holistic answer. I don't have too much to add there. The one thing I'll add is, and this is both a very big pro and a very big con, is a lot of Minervan life is about not having a lot of the comforts which a typical university student has, but sort of being thrown into being a working professional in the city. And so like a working professional takes care of their food, sort of cleans their room and does all of that, does their laundry, finds their own gym if they have to, finds the library if they have to, nothing is on campus. So that's both a big pro in the sense that immediately, like in my case, I keep saying the example that like most days I'm out in the city. Like I'm not even on whatever campus, which is literally just a building. Most days, if I want to study, I'm at the public library. Or if I want to go to the gym, I go to the local YMCA. I bump into like 5 different locals. On the way, I find a museum, which I go and visit next Sunday. That is all like beautiful serendipitous moments. On the con, honestly, and this is sort of beyond sort of the very macro Minerva talk and the benefits. This is a big con, is sort of the daily nitty-gritties of Minerva life boils down a lot to just sort of living in the city beyond just your studying and your cool projects and your cool classmates. It's sort of the grocery shopping and the cooking, especially in expensive cities like SF, and the walking 20 minutes to the library and the gym.
For sure.
That is a lot of Minervan life. It's just daily struggles and challenges which eat up a lot of time. Big pro, big con is what I'll add here. We will transition, and I have a few questions here for you for sure about Minervans. And so if we're talking a lot about Minerva, I want to talk about, as is the name of your podcast, the Humans of Minerva. We'll talk about both students and professors. Let's start with professors before we actually get deeper into students. From whatever interactions you've had with a few of your Minerva professors, a lot of them have held teaching positions at top universities. Those could be Ivies or UCs, and made the switch to Minerva, which is sort of a big career leap, even for them, as it is a big jump for us as students. What do you think are their motivations for actually coming and working with Minerva?
Yeah, so I mean, this isn't a really representative sample because I only know, responses from some like a few professors that I've talked to about this. But a lot of them that have talked to me about it, have been like, one, the focus is on teaching and teaching well. Other universities, oftentimes, professorship is more about the research, more research heavy, and then teaching is just like a side thing they have to do. So some professors aren't teachers, right? Some professors are good at research, good at what they do, but they're not really good teachers. Versus Minerva really focuses on teaching. It's like that is what you're doing as a professor, is you're teaching. So you have to be really bought into the pedagogy. But for people who like teaching, this is like perfect for them, right? Also being able to work within reason from different places around the world has been really good. So that has also enabled some professors to do double, like work at Minerva and also work somewhere else too, and a different higher ed. And it's more flexible with their work, with their lifestyle as well. So yeah, that's what I've heard so far, but I'm not a professor. I have only spoken to a handful, so I don't know if that's not really a representative sample, but that's what I've heard so far.
Maybe someday. Who knows, Julia?
Maybe someday.
Let's jump into students, the type of students that come to Minerva. A lot of that is filtered with the application process. Again, I don't know the other side of the coin as to how the application works, but I have a fair idea as to their filtering for a few basic traits like curiosity and compassion, and passion for the things they do. A few others I would add to the list. Let's talk about your interactions with your classmates. What are the few common threads in terms of like personality or skill sets that us Minervans?
Yeah, so there's definitely like I don't know if it's a personality thing or just like something about someone that you can just tell they're Minervan. Like they have this like Minervan quality in them, and I've seen that in like maybe one or two other people I've interacted with outside of Minerva who haven't gone to Minerva have that same Minerva quality. And like what that is, I feel like is one, deep intellectual curiosity and also emotional curiosity. Very open-minded, so just open to different ways of doing things and wanting to explore different things and just being curious about different things. I think like a certain level of like global perspective. So actually, the one to two people who I feel like have seen this like Minervan quality in, even though they're not from Minerva, is international students, like people who either are traveling outside of America, people who come into North America. I feel like international students in general, because they've been moving around, have that like cultural dexterity too. Or more likely to have that cultural dexterity. So I think it's also being culturally aware. I think also like one thing that the founder of Minerva said that we all have is like we're all spiky. So what does that mean? Like what does spiky mean? I'm still trying to figure that out. But something about like each of us has something that we are like passionate about, or like something that's unique about us. Or like we're really good in one thing, like one particular area, like we're spiky. We have some kind of like spark in us. I also would say that people at Minerva generally care. Like they just care about why they do things. They care about being intentional. They care about other things and other people outside of themselves, which I also really enjoy and am happy to be a part of too.
I have things to say here. I don't want to because I'm trying to be objective as a whole. I think you've covered a lot of things. Community building is so crucial for us because one, online classes. And so, for example, a lot of people at like great liberal arts colleges, a lot of the community is built with like peer interactions during class physically. And number two, because we're such a small class and we are moving to 7 cities, sort of the only thing that stays the same is the people you're actually moving with, and everything else. It's very important that like Minervans actually bond. Part of that is I think Minervans ourselves, as you said, being caring and curious. I would give some of the credit to Minerva, maybe 30%, maybe 20-30% of that credit to Minerva because of great community events. So let's talk about community events. Off the top of my head, Minerva Talks and 1001s, but feel free to add to the list if you'd like to.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I actually just spoke to some of the original student experience team members back from when Minerva first started, when we first started these traditions, and some of the backstory behind it. So it's actually very interesting. So 1001s. So for our audience, 1001s are these like student-led celebrations that happen usually on the weekend, usually on a Sunday, and one country will will introduce their culture, maybe do a little PowerPoint, also share food. So there's usually a budget that they're given, and they cook for everyone else, or you buy you buy the food if you're not a cook, and you just share about your culture. So there's just these culture sharing moments. But how it actually started? Why is it called a 1001? So way back when, like at the very start of Minerva, all assignments were due at 10 p.m. on a Sunday. And, the student experience team member that when they were first thinking of this, it was like at 10 o'clock, after a student submits assignments, like everyone is just so dead. The energy level is so low. So then they're like, how can we create some kind of tradition or ritual that could help bring up the energy again, boost morale again? It's like, you just submitted an assignment. That's amazing, right? And so they thought they'd be at 10:01. So like right when an assignment is submitted at 10 o'clock, 10:01 is when the event starts. Right, so they played around with the concept. They had students volunteering to cook for their classmates, and it just carried on. And it was a tradition that really caught on. So we still call them 1001s now. Assignments aren't always due at 10 o'clock on a Sunday anymore, but that name still lives on, and that's the backstory behind those. It's a nice like culture sharing tradition. And the Minerva Talks also came to be because this is something that, again, that's the student experience team. One of them liked to do this with their friends, and they were like, oh, like, nowadays you don't really have an opportunity to dive deep into someone's life, like, especially with how busy you get with school and stuff, or even just work in general. It's like, I want to get to know this person. Like, how did they grow up? What's like the love that they grew up with? How did they? Who were they as a student? Like growing up. So all these other random things that you don't really get to share about your life on a daily basis. Like, how can we create a forum to allow that? And so that's how Minerva Talks came to be. It was like just this time period, this hour of just one person being able to share their story how they want to. And that was also the inspiration behind Humans of Minerva. When COVID hit, it was really hard to do that in person. So this used to be an in-person thing. Someone would have PowerPoint, stand up at the front of the room, and then talk to their classmates about their life. But how could we do that online? So then that's kind of how the podcast started too, in the fourth year, when I was like, I wish I got to know more of my classmates better. So what's an excuse I can use to randomly chat with them and learn more about their lives? I feel get really creative with them too. Like, I remember Chris Wilkinson in my year, he did like his life, but in like different phases of hairstyles. And he would like, this in this phase of life I had this hairstyle, and this is what I was experiencing. So it was pretty funny. So yeah, I really enjoy them. Hopefully they're still happening.
They are still happening. Unfortunately, over our first year, only one student gave a Minerva talk, and so a big aspiration of the Minerva student life team and of our sort of class reps is that everyone should be giving a Minerva talk once during the 4 years. How do we encourage and do so? But 1001s happen almost every Sunday. They're a great, especially after an intense week of studying, a great way for the class to come together and bond and just sort of lay out some specific. Yeah. It's not only cooking food from their culture, but they make a proper slideshow. They talk about their culture. Sometimes they sing songs, they do dances. We had the Egyptians dress someone up in a mummy and sort of get them out like in a so all sorts of interesting creative things. We play quizzes about their culture. It's just sort of a cultural one. What is like Norwegian culture? What is Indian culture? What is Pakistani culture? And so on. Um, what I definitely want to touch on, we've talked a lot about a lot of great aspects of Minerva. I think it is a great institution. I also think that there are flaws and limitations, not just of Minerva, but of every institution. I love talking about those on each episode. I have honestly a decently long list myself. I'll start with you. Any major flaws or limitations or drawbacks of Minerva of your entire experience?
Yeah, it's definitely not for every profession, I'd say. It's very tech oriented, just because of the nature of her classes too. It's really hard to do lab and find lab time. If that's what you want to be, like, you want to be a scientist, probably don't go to Minerva. If you want to be a doctor, probably don't go to Minerva. If you want to do like civil engineering or something that requires like a professional certification, probably don't go to Minerva. So there's a lot of limitations to like what careers are good and bad there. I'd also say because it's so new, there isn't a ton of alumni like other universities have. And so professionally, like, the professional development team at Minerva, like they I think they do a great job with what they have. But the fact is, they just don't have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of alumni to tap into. At other universities, like they have a whole list of like different companies and that alumni are part of that people can get referred to. Here, we don't have that yet, right? Because we're so new. A lot of companies have never heard of Minerva, and so when you put Minerva University on your application, it's like I think for us, getting past the resume screen is harder than if you go to like Harvard or Stanford or something, right? That being said, I think we do really well in interviews. I think if you're able to get past the survey, past the resume screening, Minervans tend to do very well in interviews because basically what you went to Minerva for is like a story, right? Like you have a super interesting story that people want to listen to. So if you're able to tell that story, you have the opportunity to tell that story, that's when people are like, oh, this person is special. Even if you're like not the greatest Minerva student, like at the end of the day, when you leave Minerva, you leave with a story, which I think is more powerful nowadays than just like a good name on your resume, right? Like it's really about the skills and experience that you have, which Minerva like teaches you and gives you through the different moving around to different cities and stuff. I'd also say, yes, you miss out on the typical college experience. We don't have sororities or fraternities. We don't have parties really. I mean, like we do a little bit, but not to the extent that other colleges do, just because there's no space to, and also like you're trying to adult too. It's hard. You don't have very much time. Mm-hmm. I'd also say in terms of like after Minerva, like some things I had trouble with was like you definitely get antsy after being in one place for a couple months because you're like, I want to move. You show your body so used to. We talked about it earlier. So it takes some getting used to of like being in one place again for a while. We're too used to pursuing novelty over nuance. That's often something that like I know some people who are like, okay, like Minervans, like they're all like all everything. But it's really because Minervans are too. I feel like sometimes too used to seeking novelty. Sometimes you miss out on nuance. Mm-hmm. I'd also say that your reality is somewhat warped. Like, yes, you're traveling around the world, but you still are kind of in a bubble too with Minervans. Minervans are very smart people. They are very curious people. And you're not going to find that outside, just like in the regular world. Like, there's not as many people who are like that. There definitely are, not saying that there aren't, but it's more rare to find. So I think adjusting to reality of like the general population is not as curious or interested in what you have to say. And in the world, like conversations are just not as rich. It can be, but it's rare. It's more rare to find.
Awesome. I think we've covered a lot of ground. This has been a very non-academic, more fun conversation. I also really enjoyed hearing some personal anecdotes and stories. I'm hoping people are more inspired to at least check out the website and check out further details about Minerva. Go and watch Lillian's episode to hear more about the academic side, maybe the more serious side of Minerva, because Minerva definitely isn't like a 4-year vacation. It's very academic. Um, if I were to fast forward in time, 2 to 3 years from today, you're making a big shift in your life already, Toronto to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Personally, do you see yourself in a similar path, or do you feel like there's a pivot that's coming up within 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, so I do like to think of my life in like 5-year increments. So when I graduated, started the next like 5-year increment, and these 5 years have really been about like developing my skills, my habits. I am moving to SF, as I mentioned, on Friday this week. I'm hoping that in 2 to 3 years I'll still be there. I do want to be in one place for a little bit longer and like dive into that nuance or novelty and just develop my community is like the theme of my next year. And then after that, in 2 to 3 years, when the next 5-year life phase starts, like that phase is going to be really about impact. So thinking about how I can take the skills and habits I've now formed, the community I've formed to really make a difference. So I see these 5 years after Minerva as being just like learning a lot. And then next 5 years is going to be rethinking about like where I'm making impact, how I make impact. That might be a career switch. That might be doing something on the side. I don't know yet. That's kind of still far in the future. But that's general direction where I want to be.
Awesome. We will jump into the fast fire round of questions. I don't even have to explain this to you because I literally got the fast fire round of questions idea. So I will jump right in.
Yeah, sure.
Keep your answers short, one phrase or one sentence typically. Let's start with your favorite rotation city.
Seoul.
Okay, one reason why.
One reason why COVID did not happen, and it was a fun time to explore a different culture and very different city. Also, I love the
food. Your favorite Minerva tradition, and again, if you could define it in like one sentence.
Yeah, Friendsgiving. So it's a time, it's basically Thanksgiving, but with your friends. We all cook for each other, and it's a good community building thing. We do it now with alumni as well.
Awesome. Number 3, we've talked about HCs at length with Lillian. I'm hoping someone has the context, but here I'm going to ask for your favorite HC. And again, if you could just define the HC.
Yeah, my favorite HC, I would say is... Oh, there's 2 that I like. Can I give 2? I'll do 2 really quickly. One is Right Problem, because I think people don't spend enough time characterizing a problem. They just try to find solutions. But if you don't work on characterizing the problem first, then you're going to find a solution that doesn't actually fit what you're looking for, the actual need. So I love that one. Also, merchant properties, because I just find it really fascinating that we can, the whole grid and sum of its individual parts. And I think that's a really cool thing to think about in our world today.
2 more. One thing you'd change about Minerva University if tomorrow, like you were president of Minerva, any one thing you think should be better?
More community space. As someone who's really interested in how space brings together people, I'm like, our res halls are not made for community gathering. It's happened in Seoul. Seoul has a good res hall with like good common space, but there's not enough common space for students to actually mingle and like be able to host events together and be able to talk to each other. And yes, I'm not talking about having a huge campus, but like just having a space, like a common space where we can hang out would be great.
Lastly, the most challenging aspect of actually being a Minerva doing the 4 years in 7 cities.
Ooh, most challenging thing. I think I was just constantly tired. Trying to balance everything, balancing your school, your friends, your exploring the different cities and not feeling FOMO. That was definitely very tiring.
There's definitely a lot of FOMO because one group is going hiking, the other group is going to a different city, the other group is applying for software engineering internships, and so it's sort of like, what do I even do? That's very real because Minervans are absolutely work hard, play hard. People,
Oh, for sure.
and that's true.
Yeah.
You know, I said lastly, but lastly, if you had, and this is not Minerva specific, this is more generally, if you had to leave this episode, it's been a great Minerva 101. But speaking directly to listeners now, assuming there's a high schooler listening, about to jump into college, any final words for them? And this could be any reflection
Mm.
learned along the way.
Yeah, I would say really focus on who you, like finding who you are and why you do things. Always ask why. Don't just blindly be taking classes. I
Hmm.
hope you're not doing that, you know. When you take this period of time in these next 4 years to figure out you might not have an answer by the end of the 4 years of like who you are, but I hope it's a little bit better than where you're at now. So just like really be critical, really be intentional about what you put your time towards, asking why, and figuring out, yeah, what you like and don't like, and more about yourself.
That's well said. Yeah, I think college beyond the degree is sort of personal transformation and finding out a little more
Mm-hmm.
about yourself. I think if a college can
Mm-hmm.
be that, kudos to the college, kudos to you. If you know a little bit more about why you're doing what you're doing and what you want post graduation, awesome. I think that's a great sort of takeaway from this episode and from the college experience generally. Um, Brilliant. If Julia, if a listener is interested in Minerva, maybe currently working on the application process, wants a bit of advice, or they just have follow up questions, or they just want to say hi, what do you think is a good way to reach you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Julia Ip, or you can also email me, Julia Ip, julia.ip at uni.minerva.edu. I still have my email open for all things Minerva related or school related.
Julia, thank you for being on the podcast. Awesome episode. I learned a thing or two new about Minerva. I sort of I'm looking at Minerva in a different way. I'm sure listeners learned a ton. Was a pleasure to host you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was fun.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on UNI Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, UNI Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to UNI Unveiled.